Hello everyone, it's Mariners Fanatic back with another YouTube video, and today we will be going over my top 10 free agent targets for the Mariners 2021-2022 offseason. This list isn't necessarily in order, but some of the bigger names are towards the front half of the video, and then I have some honorable mentions towards the end. My goal is to hopefully get at least one of these right. So if there's one player on this list that is a Mariner next season, then it was a win. But if there's more than one, two or three, then I'll take that as well. Some of these are more realistic targets than others, and I tried to keep that in mind for most of the list, but I had to include a couple players on here that I don't necessarily think we'll get, but really, really want. And some of you may disagree with this list, and you guys can put who you think we should target in the comments below. So let's go ahead and get into the list. First player we're going to be talking about in this video is Kris Bryant, and I'm choosing Bryant here for multiple reasons. Kris Bryant played nearly every position last year between the Cubs and the San Francisco Giants, except for second base and catcher. He played every other position. Now, is he an elite defender at every position? No. His best position is still probably third base. Follow that up with left field or first base. And that's the big reason why he would be a target, because third base is definitely a priority for us this offseason, but we could also use somebody who can play a little bit of outfield, especially left field, in times of need. And the fact that he can play first base pretty well too is also a plus if Evan White is not back up and Ty France needs a day off or something. Jerry Dipoto has talked about position versatility and unselfish players, and Kris Bryant is the epitome of that, with the multiple positions he can play and of how unselfish of a player he is. He had a great season offensively as well last year. He had a 123 WRC plus and was a very productive hitter for both the Cubs and the Giants. The biggest issue with Kris Bryant is there's of course going to be a lot of competition for him. He could go back to the Cubs, or he could go back to the Giants, or another team could sway him with a really big paycheck. My estimate for a contract for him that we would give him is about a 5-year, $125 million contract. He's 29. That would put him through his age 34 season. I'm not too keen on going much more than 6 years at the most, especially considering our luck with the Robinson Cano deal, and Jerry's not going to just jump right back into one of those deals. So I don't see us going much more than 5 or 6 years on any contract this offseason. Ultimately, I'm not crazy good on predicting the money and how much a player is going to get, but my guess is 5 years and 125 million could secure us Kris Bryant. The next player we're going to be talking about, and this one will get a lot of groans, is Carlos Correa. Now, I understand a lot of us do not like the Astros or what they did in the past. However, that doesn't change the fact that Carlos Correa is really, really good. He's still 27. He's an elite fielder and hitter. He's really the whole package, except maybe the speed. He doesn't really steal a lot of bases, but other than that, he's the whole package. There's going to be a lot of competition for Correa, so I'm not sure if it's worth putting our hat in the ring. However, he's obviously a very talented player, and you can't risk at least taking a look at what it would cost to get him. For me, like I said, I wouldn't go much more than 6 years, so I'm going to say 6 years, 180 million. That's about 30 million a year. He's definitely worth that price tag. According to Fangraphs Value, he's had a couple $40 million worth seasons, so realistically 30 million a year might be a little low. Obviously, Correa is a great shortstop, and he'll likely want to stick there, which is why he's less likely for us, considering Jerry Dipoto's comments about wanting to keep JP at short. Correa at third base would be amazing if he was willing to transition to that position. He has a cannon of an arm, great range, and a big frame. Could be similar to Alex Rodriguez in his transition from shortstop to third base. I think Correa would be really good at third, but it all depends on what he wants to do. And ultimately, if Jerry's looking for players who are unselfish and Correa is just deemed as too much of a selfish player, then it won't be the right fit. My guess is Correa probably goes to one of the New York clubs, the Philadelphia Phillies, or potentially even the Tigers. So he's probably going to go to a bigger market team or the Tigers because AJ Hinch is there. So, like I said, we'll probably get outbid for Correa, but it's worth putting our hat in the ring. Next up on this list is Kevin Gausman. Gausman is 30 years old, so he's still in a decent spot in his career to earn some money and be in his prime. Gausman's been pretty consistent. He's pitched a lot of innings, and you know he's going to be reliable. He didn't pitch amazing in the playoffs, but he did okay. And having that playoff experience is so important. Along with Correa and Bryant, the fact that both these players played in the playoffs will really help the Mariners as a whole. The more players we have with playoff experience, the better. Of course, there's going to be a lot of competition for Gausman. The Giants are probably going to want him back, and I don't know who else yet. There hasn't been too many rumors going around, but that'll start to pick up as the offseason starts. But he is a number one starter in my eyes. Maybe not the flashiest number one starter, but he is a number one starter, which is something that we need and I've talked about. So adding Kevin Gausman to the club would be really big for us. My guess is about a 4-year, $100 million contract would sway him to come to Seattle. That may be too much or too little, I'm not sure. Like I said, I'm not good at predicting contracts, but I think that would get him to come here and hopefully be our staff ace. Next up on the list, we have Starling Marte. Now, this one, a lot of people are probably going to be thrown for a loop for. Hey, we have Jared Kelenic. Hey, we have Kyle Lewis. But Kyle Lewis's knees may or may not recover. We don't know. Can't really take that risk. We're not at the point anymore where we're seeing how players develop or waiting on injuries or anything like that. It's time to really make a push for it and go win. And Kelenic struggled early on out in center field. He progressed towards the end of the year. Of course, his bat got going. That's something that I'm not as worried about. More about defense. Marte has great speed. He stole over 40 bases last year between the Marlins and the A's. Speed is something that we definitely need to have. Besides Dylan Moore, we didn't really have a lot of speed threat on the base paths. So adding a guy like Marte just instantly helps your lineup, both in the outfield, tracking down balls and stealing bases and getting pitchers out of their rhythm. Center field probably is not a focus for Jerry Dipoto, but we don't know what's going on through his head. But I think this would be a very underrated move. Unfortunately, we're probably going to be outbid for Marte's services, as I probably wouldn't go more than 3 years and about 45 million for him. He's 33 years old, so he's still in his prime, but he could be starting to slow down in a couple years. So I wouldn't go more than 3 years, and that's probably where a hang-up would be if we did target him, as someone might give him more years or more money. I know particularly the Philadelphia Phillies struggled out in center field last year. They're going to be looking to fill that spot. And there's a lot of other teams that need outfielders. So just don't write off the Mariners hunting for an outfielder this offseason. I talked about it in my last video, but it's kind of a need. It's a lesser need, but it is a need. Next up on the list, we have Robbie Ray. Ray, like Gausman, is 30 years old. He's still kind of in his prime. So we're going to stick with that 4-year, about $80 million contract that I think could get him here. Our biggest competition is going to be the Blue Jays, of course, but there will be other teams in the mix as well. Ray also profiles as a number one starter. He's a big strikeout guy. The same thing with Gausman. They're both strikeout pitchers, but they eat a lot of innings as well. Also, like I said, he is a number one starter, and that's something that we were missing last year. So to bring Ray in would fill that void. Someone who is not on this list that probably could be would be Carlos Rodon. And I decided to go with Ray over Rodon because of the innings and the fact that Rodon has more of an injury history. I also think it's likely he will re-sign with the White Sox or could potentially go to a team like the Astros. So I think it's more likely for us to get Robbie Ray than Carlos Rodon, and so that's why I have him on this list and Rodon is not. Number 6 on this list is Kendall Graveman. I really want to bring Graveman back, guys. I don't know if it's going to happen. I hope that the bridge was not burned there last year at the trade deadline. But Kendall Graveman is only 30 years old. He's still in a good spot in his career. I think that his transition to the bullpen has been very helpful for him, and we were in a way responsible for that. And so he may not see it that way. He may not come back to us, but I'm hoping maybe there's something there and we can bring him back. Watching him in an Astros uniform is not ideal, and so I'd love to bring him back for our bullpen next year. A bullpen that is honestly a strength of this roster right now. However, one or two pieces can really put us over the edge and be a dominant top 5 bullpen the whole year. I'm projecting about a 2-year, $15 to $20 million contract, nothing crazy. He's a reliever, so it's hard to gauge what relievers are going to get. Obviously, the top relievers like Liam Hendriks get a lot, but Graveman's not quite there yet, as this is his first full year as a reliever. So it's kind of hard to gauge what his market will be. But ultimately, I think he'd be great to bring him back good for the clubhouse. Him having that playoff experience this year with the Astros, again, will help us in our own playoff push. So I think bringing back Graveman, honestly, it should be a priority. It probably isn't, but if I were GM, it would be. Moving on to another arm who is 30 years old, Marcus Stroman. Now, I wasn't super high on Stroman to start the offseason, but the more I've seen, the more I like the guy. He's pretty active on social media, which can be a good thing or a bad thing. But he's good with the fans. He's just a guy that likes to win, and he loves baseball. I've watched videos on him talking about his pitching grips and different things, and he loves baseball, and that's what I love about him. My only issue is he profiles as more of a number two or maybe even a number three starter in some deeper rotations. He doesn't have that number one level of stuff. Ultimately, if he was our number one, it would be fine. Ultimately, I'm not sure if Stroman will want to come to the West Coast. He would probably want to go back to the Blue Jays or even the Mets or an East Coast team is probably going to be where he's interested because he's been there his whole career. But who knows? Hopefully, we can maybe pry him away and get him over to the West Coast. I'm projecting about a 3-year, $50 million contract. Like I said, he's not a number one, so he's not going to get crazy dollars, but he's still pretty good. So you can't go cheap on him. 3 years, 50 million might be cheap. I'm not sure, but that's kind of what I would go for. Of course, he had a good season with the Mets last year, but where the Mets are at right now, he may stick there if they can get things turned around. The Mets are just going to Met, so who knows? But Stroman over on the West Coast here with us would be a huge plus. Next up, we have TJ McFarland, who's coming off a pretty good year with the St. Louis Cardinals. Now, this spot would have gone to Andrew Chafin. However, Chafin has a mutual option with the Oakland Athletics. I'm not sure if they're going to pick it up. It's only like $5 million, but the Oakland A's, they're going to do what they're going to do. So if $5 million is just too much for them right now, then they won't bat an eye about letting him walk. In which case, Andrew Chafin would be my choice. But talking about TJ McFarland, he had a good year. Again, hard to gauge exactly what he would get on the open market. So maybe about a 2-year, $10 million contract. But the most important thing is we would be getting that lefty in the bullpen that we desperately need. McFarland is also 32, so he's in a good spot in his career. Relievers are pretty volatile from year to year. Guys do good one year and then not so good the next year. So now we're going to stick with TJ McFarland for the pick here for lefty bullpen arm, and we'll see if we can get him. Next up at number 9 here, we have Yan Gomes. In my last video, I talked about us needing a catcher. Not really sure how much longer that Tom Murphy's going to be on the team. Great clubhouse guy, but not sure if he's the answer there long term and helps us get to the playoffs. Yan Gomes is a guy, again, who has playoff experience. He's a veteran. He's a great catcher, but he can also swing it a little bit. A couple years ago, he did a 2-year, $10 million deal with the Nationals. He's 34, so I kind of see him getting a similar type contract, about 2 years, 10 mil, maybe a 1 year with a player option or something like that. Moving on to our last name on the list, we have Marcus Semien. Now, a lot of you probably would have expected him earlier. I did not forget about him. I was looking at different names, and then I was like, oh, I need Semien on this list. But anyways, part of the reason why he's lower on the list, even though it's not necessarily ranked, is there's going to be a lot of competition for him, more so than some of the other players on this list. The Blue Jays are going to be in on him. The Giants are going to be in on him. We're going to be in on him. Texas, there's going to be other mystery teams that are looking at Marcus Semien. He's 31, so he's still in his prime. He has said that he wants to be on the West Coast, which helps for us. He's also willing to play other positions. Obviously, he played second base all last year with Bo Bichette at shortstop for the Blue Jays. The same situation would be true if he came here. We've got JP at shortstop, and you slide Marcus Semien over second base, or maybe he can fill in at third as well. I'm guessing his contract is going to be in the range of about 4 years, 110 million. Not totally sure on that. He just had one of the best offensive seasons for a second baseman ever, and he's going to get paid a lot of money. Ultimately, I'd have a hard time overspending or going too many years for Semien. For example, if the Blue Jays offered him 7 years, I wouldn't do it. That just reads Robinson Cano to me. So I want to stay away and avoid from that, but 4 years gets him to his 35-year-old season. Ultimately, I want to target a big name, but I don't want to stretch out the years too much. However, Marcus Semien is definitely a guy that could be worth it, so it's a risk we might have to take. So I know this has already been a long video for you guys. If you're still here sticking with me, appreciate it. And now I'm going to go over some honorable mentions. The first one being Max Scherzer. He is a true of true #1 starter that we could really use. However, he is 37 and he is looking for a contract that gets him to his 40-year-old season. He wants to stay on the West Coast, but ultimately I think a big market team is going to outspend us to try and get him, and I'm not sure if targeting Max Scherzer is a focus for Jerry Dipoto right now. Next up, we have Eduardo Escobar. Escobar had a great season last year, and he's an underrated veteran. He plays pretty solid third base. He's 32 years old, so he's younger than Kyle Seager. He's a switch hitter with just as much pop and not as much strikeout in his game as Seager. So this would be a conservative approach if we missed out on one of the bigger names and didn't go re-sign Kyle Seager. As in my opinion, Eduardo Escobar would be a upgrade over Seager, but would not be comparable to somebody like Correa or Marcus Semien. You're probably going to see Eduardo Escobar somewhere on a 2 or 3 year contract, $20 to $30 million, depending on the annual value, but he's definitely a player to consider. Another honorable mention is Kyle Schwarber. I was surprised to see that Kyle Schwarber is still only 28 years old. I feel like he's been in the league for a long time. Of course, he was with the Cubs for a while, and then with the Nationals. His bat is amazing. Defense, not so much. He's played some first base and some outfield. For us, he would probably switch time between left field and DH. I could see a DH platoon of Luis Torrens against lefties and Schwarber against righties playing out really well. And then every once in a while, he'd play left field or maybe first base every once in a while. Schwarber would be a really underrated pickup. I'm not sure how many years or dollars he would get. So it's kind of hard to gauge what Schwarber's market is. The main thing for him is his bat. A couple more honorable mentions. The second to last one is Tyler Anderson. People were pretty upset at him the last couple weeks of the season with his blow-ups against the Angels, but those were literally his only bad starts since we traded for him. He was extremely underrated and pitched very well for us. If we missed out on a bigger arm in the rotation, bringing back Tyler Anderson is definitely worth it. He's not going to be expensive, so it's definitely a name to look at and keep tabs on if we miss out on one of the bigger names. And then lastly, the final honorable mention is Chris Taylor. I already had him on the list before his 3-homer night against the Braves in Game 5, and that just kind of solidified his spot. Of course, Taylor can play in the outfield, center field, left field, and then he can play some second base or even third base. So he's definitely a super utility player, and I would love to have him back. Obviously, there's players I would prefer over him. Chris Taylor would be a great backup option. So there you have it, guys. That is my list of free agent targets for the 2021-2022 offseason. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Of course, put your own targets in the comments below. This is strictly for free agents, this video. My next video will be about trades, so stay tuned. So I'm excited to see it get going, and I hope you guys are too. And I will see you guys in the next video. Mariners Fanatic, out.